we're going to define light levels. So when you're looking at you're at your local greenhouse garden center and you're taking a look at those tags and they say full sun, part shade, full shade. What does that actually mean outside of the obvious? So let's go through and define those four.
Okay. So let's go with full sun, because that's kind of your easiest.
We'll work our way down.
Yep. Most plants you're going to find them to be full sun.
Yeah, boy, if we were to look at our greenhouses and what we do, what would you say, 75%
is full sun.
Are in that sun category.
Right. Full sun to partial sun.
Now we're because begonias have gotten so popular, we're having more of that partial.
But we're also starting to try to really search out blooming, because there's a lot of shade plants like hostas.
Okay.
We don't carry hostas, but there's a lot of shade plants that have beautiful foliage but have no flowers.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to like get stuff for our area. We have more of sandy or gravelly type poor conditions. So what can we put in poor conditions that the deer won't eat? And
and I live in the woods, and
maybe
I'm in
a shade.
Total shade.
Yeah.
And I tell those people, get a chainsaw, cut some trees down.
Yeah,
which
and
they don't always
shade,
like
and they
that.
want blooming like flowers, and I'm like, that's hard. So we've been searching it out.
Yep.
But obvious, a geranium. Geranium's like full sun.
Yep. So full sun, what does that mean? And full sun is going to be 6 or more hours a day of that direct sun. So they're getting kind of blasted with that sunshine, and they can handle that. So full sun means 6 or more hours of that direct afternoon sun, really,
that hot, intense sun.
Yeah, so it's going to put it in that category of kind of your most intense sunlight.
So if it's coming up and you're like, oh, I'm shade, and then like around that 10:30, 11, 12 o'clock area, you have blazing hot sun, you're full sun.
Yep. So
you might have a little bit of shade in the morning, but in that afternoon,
right.
You're full sun. You're considered full sun area.
So certainly geraniums would be in that category, and we grow our geraniums, our geranium hanging baskets we put up above. They can handle the heat, they can handle that full blasting sun, and they thrive.
Yep, because the soil will dry down in the full sun side of the house, and they don't like their roots wet.
Yeah.
They don't like their feet wet.
Right, for geraniums.
Yeah. So the partial sun.
Partial sun. So what does that mean? So partial is going to be kind of that next category of 4 to 6 hours of sun, so a little bit less. And it's going to talk about specifically in that afternoon area. So you might, like you just said, you might have shade up until noonish or whatever, or 1 or 2, and then the sun crests over your house, and maybe you're on the south side or whatever, or the west side, and it gets that full blasting sun for the next 4 to 6 hours. That's going to be in the afternoon. That's going to be considered part or partial sun.
I like to think of it as if you go out to work in your yard and you say, oh, I'm going to get my work done in the morning because it's going to be too hot in the afternoon, chances are you're part of that full sun to part sun area, because
the
that
more
sun
intense,
gets so intense, the more intense it gets, your plants feel it.
Sure. So in this category, and we said geraniums for the sun, also petunias. Petunias are also going to be in that full sun to partial, part sun. We grow our great big hanging baskets on our building. It's actually on the north side. So, and those are super petunias. It's actually not ideal.
No.
They're not getting enough sun
they're getting a lot of light
by the standard of that tag. And sometimes you just have to step up that care. Now, they don't lack anything. I mean, they get massive, we're talking 6 foot diameter hanging baskets.
But if you look at them, because we can look at them through the window portion, the front side will be just gorgeous.
Because it turns towards that light.
Beautiful. But the back side, where they're closer to the building and there is no actual sun, there's nothing. It's almost like...
We go through and we cut that out.
It's just kind of
because everything turned towards that light source. So on the back side of our those great big hanging baskets, where it's not getting really anything.
Right.
Yeah, and that's normal. And we could correct that by turning the hanging baskets, but we just let them go. So.
But full sun, partial sun. That's going to be your afternoon sun.
4 to 6 hours in the afternoon is usually. So the next step down from part sun is going to be part shade.
Which sounds so weird, because if you have part sun, wouldn't you automatically have part shade?
Yes, but the definition.
That's why I was like,
afternoon.
cut that one out. But
No,
you're like,
afternoon.
No.
Afternoon versus
Morning.
kind of the morning, before that midday. So if you have 4 to 6 hours of sunlight in the morning to midday, that's where you are stepping down from that. The difference between the part sun to part shade is kind of the timing. So is it afternoon or is it more in the morning? So if we're more in the morning, that's where we're going to have that 4 to 6 hours more, up until that afternoon time. That's going to define as the partial shade.
Oh.
Timing wise of the day. The afternoon sun is hot and intense. You might have the sun come up and it might have that sun on it from whatever in the morning, 9, 10 a.m. But usually that's not the intense, certainly not the most intense part of the day. So that's why there's a difference in that is
between part sun, part shade.
Yep, that's the difference is. Are we talking the morning sun or are we talking afternoon sun? Because there's a difference.
There is.
Yep.
So going into actual just shade.
Yeah.
And we have lots of pretty ones, and we're gonna go through variety. We're gonna take a look at this week, like begonias or like certain ones. So we're gonna highlight certain ones throughout the week.
Sure.
But let's talk about full shade.
Okay.
Because
so other than the obvious, is that less than 4 hours of sun. And it's probably going to be kind of a filtered, so you probably have big shade trees around your home, and it's going to throw a lot more shade. Yeah, that sun might peek through at different parts of the day, but generally speaking, you're going to have much more filtered sunlight, shaded to full shade of.
On the north or east side, typically the house will shadow it. You might have a full sun yard, but up by your house it might be very.
I'm thinking of one of our customers. She lives in the woods, and
we're talking in the woods.
In the woods, and trees are next to the house, and she's like, "Oh, I love it." Like, yeah, I bet the summer, I bet it never gets over 60 degrees in your yard. Like, you still have snow in June because that sun never gets through. I mean, it's dark.
You always say, cut the trees.
Take that chainsaw. I get teased by our kids because I took out 30 trees around our yard. I like the sunlight, and I don't want anything close to my house falling, threatening to fall on my house during a storm, and so I take the trees down. Now, we did go through and we planted some really pretty maple trees, but we've got sunlight. So,
so that shade portion, most plants won't tolerate being in the dark.
Yeah. Yep.
They need a little bit. They need bright light, but not necessarily the sun hitting them. So begonias would be a great example.
Shade to that partial.
There's different types of begonias.
Some
will take full sun, all the way down to full shade.
And that's great. That's awesome.
The dragon wings, which we'll talk about later this week. Mm-hmm. This particular one likes the shade.
Mm-hmm. Pretty little.
And it blooms.
Pomulus.
Yep.
Begonia.
This one is Beloved Peach. Isn't that pretty? And this will grow up, of course. It'll get nice and full. And another one is,
Brawalia.
This is from Proven Winners.
Yep. The Brawalia.
Yep. This is the Endless Illumination. And I'm kind of shaking. I don't know why.
Too much coffee.
I guess so. So you can see how pretty that is. This little plant.
Last year was our first year growing this.
I put it with Rex begonias, and I had a blooming one in there too, an angel wing.
Oh, it's aggressive.
And each plant, it just but it was aggressive, but it kind of came out and it was more airy.
Beautiful. And we only had the white.
Well, they mistagged it last year.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
We were supposed to get this color, and we're
excited about
white.
Growing this color.
So I'm excited for that.
They turn out gorgeous, and boy, if you want a hanging basket in the shade, that would be the
Do you want me to
ticket.
plant up a few of those?
We should. Yeah. It turns out absolutely gorgeous. So it was actually new for us. We had never grown it before, but we totally absolutely loved it.
So here's something that I was thinking of. A lot of your shade plants have petals that have more of that.
Like the actual leaf, you mean?
Yeah, that has more squish to it, more water retention. Like you think of impatiens.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? The stems. But this isn't.
Yeah.
So that theory of that it has to have that is false, but you'll find that stuff that has more of the water retention in it, they
almost
tend
like
to
a succulent
shade.
type.
Yeah, but succulents,
They can go in the sun too.
no, they are sun.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But the Browalia absolutely love this. It turned out
Look at that
stunning.
even together.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you're talking full shade, they do need some light. I mean, don't stick them in the darkest area. And be careful, because if you're putting them under your trees, like a pine tree,
Yeah.
stuff might not grow in there because of the acidity of
Needles,
that tree.
yeah, needles falling. And
So just because you've tried it in the past and you've said, oh, I've done that plant in the shade and it didn't work. Well, check to see what you're doing, or maybe you need to have a container that has good quality soil in it in order for it to not have that acidity in the soil, because that might also affect it.
Right, and you can bend the rules. So this is not a rigid. So don't get set in. It has to be full shade, so you can try and see what works. A lot of the times it comes down to care. So it might not have been the sun, it might have been your care. You're like, yeah, I didn't water it for weeks. Well, that's the reason it's dead. It's not because it was, didn't get enough sunlight. It's because there was absolutely no care to it.
Like our hanging baskets are not in the right spot.
They do great.
But they do great.
I mean,
we know that the backside's gonna not have
Beautiful.
the blooms.
Yeah.
But the front side does fantastic.
Yeah, technically speaking, they're not in the right area. But our care is up, and therefore it turns out absolutely gorgeous. Now, there's sometimes you can't bend the rules. You cannot take a fuchsia plant and put it in the sun. It will burn. And it's very hard for us in the greenhouses to find a spot for our fuchsia hanging baskets. Like, we have to get them like underneath other hanging baskets, because the light in here is so intense in the greenhouses. You'll see the leaves on the fuchsias will get burned. So if you have a fuchsia,
the lophos too.
Yeah,
the
lophos too
need full sun.
Yeah,
and if they don't have it, they'll be nice and green.
Yeah,
but they won't really bloom.
Yeah, so you can bend the rules on the vast majority. There are certain ones that you cannot. But guess what? The plant will let you know. So you watch for that. And make sure that you care. If
you're not doing well with it in one spot, move it to a little bit more shaded or a little bit more sun, depending on what you think it needs, and see how it reacts. Because they react very quickly.
Yeah.
Like they will let you know.
If you're watching, they will tell you.
Within a week or 2 weeks, you'll know.
Some people have, like, I've got 4 hanging baskets on my front porch, and this one doesn't do well. Well, take a look and see that one hanging basket. What's the difference? And it's probably it's getting a lot more shade in the afternoon or whatever. But that might be a factor driving why it's not doing as well.
Right.
So another thing to also think about is the placement of where you're putting those plants according to like north, south, east, or west. So that's another thing and you really kind of have to stand in your yard and assess it. We can't say 100% for sure, if you put it on the west side, it's going to have lots of sun, or on the south side. Well, you might have great big trees that are throwing lots of shade, and maybe your north side, which shouldn't get as much sun, maybe that actually gets a lot more sun because there's no trees.
Or a big building, or
you have to assess your yard specifically and see what it is, but generally speaking,
multiple times during the day.
Yeah. So on the south side of your house or the west side of your house, typically that's going to get a lot more sun. The north side or the east side is going to get a lot more shade, just generally speaking. The sun comes up in the east and sets in the west. So you might have to think about that of, okay, this is only going to have morning sun.
Right.
Or is it going to have that hot, intense setting sun?
Which will help with that.
Yeah.
And as we start putting planters together, because I like to see the plants and the colors as I plant up planters, so I tend to wait until the last minute.
Yeah.
You'll find we're taking sun plants and putting them with sun plants, and we're taking shade plants and putting them with shade plants. And we might be able to mix some of those partial sun, partial shade, but as you're buying containers,
try to stay
be aware.
Close to.
I've been to some of these shops, and I'm not talking like just box retailers, but we're gonna say shops, greenhouses across the board. And I look at a container and I'm thinking, are they not educated?
Like, that's not gonna work.
Like you can't, technically, these don't match, these don't combine. You can't have shade and full sun. Like they're gonna get it home, they're gonna have it for a week or two, and they're gonna be like, oh, it just fizzled out.
They're unequally yoked. You know, they're
Yeah.
just like a geranium.
That drives me crazy.
You know, hey, wouldn't this look nice together? And you're like, well,
If you want to see me start itching,
a geranium, full sun, shade. Yeah, that's not going to work in the long run. It might work for this week,
it might
2 weeks.
It might work for a short time.
You know, if you got a party this week, fine. But eventually, in the long run, it's just not going to pan out.
Which
and it's
I'm
gonna
always
suffer.
looking at what, stuff looks pretty when you put it together, like right away. It always does. I look for the long term. I want to know, like, what is this going to look like July,
right.
September? If they have it into October, can they transition it into fall? How long will it last till it frosts? That's what I'm looking at when I'm planting stuff. And maybe I'm totally overthinking it, and I am an overthinker. I will admit that. Way overthinker.
But if that makes it easier in the long run, and
right, I want them to be successful with it and be happy.
Something that you're happy with, like, look how gorgeous this turned out.
I want them to be proud enough that at the end of the season, they're still taking pictures and sending them to their friends.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we're going to talk more about partial shade and shade plants this week. So we talked a little bit about what's the difference of sun versus shade. But this week we're going to actually start taking some of the plant varieties and focusing on them each day this week of here's their care, here's their benefits, here's what their growth looks like once they, they're small right now, but as they get larger, what happens, what's the cleanup. Right. Is that a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. And of course we have a lot of information, a lot of videos, how-to videos at our Sharky's Greenhouses YouTube channel. There's literally hundreds of fantastic videos there, so check that out. And then head to our beatyourneighbor.com website. We have tips and tricks and blog articles, and of course our Beat Your Neighbor fertilizer is at beatyourneighbor.com.